Trump, Canada needs a Department of Government Efficiency. Donald Trump put Jade Bhattacharya as the Director of National Health. So that's interesting. That's an interesting thing. We've got that. We'll look at that. Food costs are getting attention in Nunavut. People are doing an email campaign to their MP talking about the cost of food. Alberta Sovereignty Act, and that's happening with regards to oil and gas, and they're shutting down the federal government's elbowing in to carbon taxes and carbon levels and CO2 output and all the rest. So Alberta's saying, I don't think so, guys. Back up, get your own sandwich, okay? Nova Scotia election happened yesterday, and the Liberals got 2 seats. They're no longer the official opposition, and Tim Houston won bigly with 42. Surprising, because Higgs didn't win, right? Like, so that's weird. It's super weird. Anyway, he retained his seat. We'll talk about that. Jagmeet wants to go to war with the United States over the tariffs that Trump is proposing, and yeah, Canada first, baby, Canada first. And Maxime Bernier is going to start us off today. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start talking, obviously, about the election, about the rhetoric that people are using, about Canada first, and about the tariffs that Donald Trump wants to put on Canada. So we have, I think, a rational response to this. And a rational response is, if somebody says, listen, your country's doing X, Y, Z to my country, and I'm going to put tariffs on you in a couple of months when I get in if you don't make these changes to address these issues that I have. A rational person says, what are the issues? Okay, there's some things that we could do about that, and we'll start working on them right now, and we'll communicate that back to you as well, as much as we can, to avoid these tariffs, because they would be damaging to us and probably you, but I understand your concerns with regards to the issues you've brought up. Yeah, I could understand that. And Maxime Bernier does that. But Pierre Poilievre says these are unjustified claims. These are unjustified allegations that Canada is not engaging in this stuff, and blah, 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 blah. And then Poilievre goes on a rant about Canada first. And I just think it's weird, because it's not something that is, what's the word he uses? There's a specific word, unjustified threat. He calls it an unjustified threat. And I think, like, the drugs pouring over from Canada into the United States, if I was the president of the United States, or the incoming president of the United States, I'd put Canada on notice if they were doing that. And if illegals were crossing the border terrorist illegals were crossing the border at the rate terrorist illegals are crossing the border in Canada, and I was the president of the United States, yeah, I think that's justified. I don't think it's unjustified at all. So I don't know what Pierre Poilievre is talking about. It seems crazy. Okay, so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Maxime Bernier says everyone should take a deep breath and stop freaking out following this threat by Trump to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian exports. This is extremely unlikely to happen, although it doesn't mean we should ignore it. Trump is the author of The Art of the Deal, and he has a habit of making outrageous declarations as a bargaining position to force his counterparts to do something or make concessions under threat. Yep, he does this all the time. Ask for way more than you think that you could possibly get. And if they give it to you, great, right? Awesome. Like, yes, I'll do my show for $1 million or more. I should probably aim higher. And then they give it to you and you're like, oh, great. I would have settled for 500,000, right? I would have settled for free. Anyway, no, not really, because I do get paid for this, but still, I get paid by my audience. Only you guys. I don't get paid by advertisers. I don't get paid by governments. I don't get paid by political parties or anything like that. The only people that I get paid by are you guys. And I often tell you guys that this is my show, so I'm not going to change it for you either. I'm just going to do it and tell you what I think. Anyway, regardless, I digress. Trump is the author of Art of the Deal, and he asks for way more than he would settle for to open a negotiation. So you're on the back step. You're trying to negotiate your way out of his threat, and he knows that he doesn't really mean it, or does he? Right? And so you negotiate from a position of uncertainty, right? And like, that works for Donald Trump because he's certain, mostly, probably. He seems kind of certain most of the time. Anyway, back to this. Trump similarly threatened to impose a 25% tariff on imported goods from Mexico in 2019 if the Mexico government didn't curb the flow of migrants. You know what the Mexican government did? They curbed the flow of migrants. You're damn right they did. There are limits to how much tariffs he can impose given how interdependent our economies are. Yes, it would affect jobs in Canada, but also jobs in the United States. But I talked about that yesterday, and it would be win-win for him because he'd just move those jobs to the United States and say, America first, right? Canada first. Trump says he will make us pay, but he knows that it's in America's best. American businesses and consumers, he knows it's American businesses and consumers who will actually pay the tariffs. Our exporting industries would, of course, suffer considerably, but inflation would spike in the U.S. Trump knows that the flow of illegal migrants and fentanyl from Canada into the U.S. is a tiny problem compared to what's coming in from Mexico or China in the case of fentanyl. He probably added Canada to this threat, not because he believed we were a big part of the problem, but because he despises Trudeau, knows he's weak and on his way out, and wants to wield a big stick in preparation for the renegotiation of the USMCA, and demands that we spend more on defense. Yeah, at least 2%, which is the NATO minimum. Thanks to Trudeau's insane mass immigration policies, we are also seen internationally as a country that has opened its doors to everyone, including criminals and terrorists who sometimes cross the border into the United States. The new administration rightly sees Canada as a threat to American security. What we need to do is to preserve our access to the United States market is by all means not to get into a commercial war, threaten to retaliate. It's to make real reforms, regain control of our borders, impose a moratorium on immigration and deport all illegals and foreign criminals, stop the experiment on making hard drugs more easily accessible, and upgrade our defense instead of turning our armed forces into a club for woke sissies. And get ready for renegotiation of the USMCA with tangible offers to put on the table, including scrapping supply management, which would actually be good for Canadian consumers. What we need is a serious government willing to do the necessary reforms, not just placate Trump and preserve our access to U.S. markets, because this will be beneficial to Canadians. I agree. I think that's the best take on all of this. Here's Jagmeet Singh. You want to know what he says? Let's go to war. Let's go to war with the United States because we'll lose. And we'll lose badly, and we'll come limping back and offer some concessions or whatever. And I mean, who knows what Trump will want to fix things if we screw things up, right? Definitely to not ever see Chrystia Freeland in her red dress ever again. Here's this.
Donald Trump's threats of tariffs could threaten hundreds of thousands of Canadian mortgage-paying jobs. The only thing a bully responds to is strength. So where is our plan to fight back? Where is the war room? Where is a concrete plan to bring our issue before CUSMA? Why isn't the Prime Minister fighting like hell for Canadian jobs?
Hear, 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 hear. Mr. Speaker, rather than panicking, we're engaging in constructive ways to protect Canadian jobs like we have before. I don't think the idea of going to war with the United States is what anyone wants. What we will.
Donald Trump's threats of
going to war with the United States is not what anyone wants. Well, who would have thought that Justin Trudeau would have said something like half sane in recent days? Wow. Pierre Poilievre is asking, hey, Justin Trudeau, what's the plan? Right? Obviously, we don't want to go to war with the United States over this tax thing, but is a Zoom call really enough? Here we go.
We need a plan for economy and security that puts Canada first. But despite the fact the Prime Minister has known for years that Trump was threatening these tariffs, and for 3 weeks that President Trump had won the election, the only plan he has is a Zoom call. No plan to reverse his disastrous liberalization of drugs that have killed people and now threaten our borders. No plan to fix the broken borders that he caused. No plan to cancel the tax increases that will drive billions and many jobs away. Where's the plan to put Canada first?
Yeah. Canada first, says Pierre Poilievre, a couple of years late. Harrison Faulkner says Pierre Poilievre says President Trump yesterday made an unjustified threat of a 25% tariff on our already weak and shrinking economy. I will put Canada's workers on Canada's security first. So this is 2.5 minutes. We'll start here and then probably jump to the end. Maybe we'll listen to it all. Maybe it's worth it. Here we go.
President Trump.
Too fast. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Yesterday made an unjustified threat of a 25% tariff on our already weak and shrinking economy. Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland were surprised, amazingly. Everyone else knew something like this could be coming because President Trump had been talking about it for years on the campaign trail. Yet 20 days ago, Chrystia Freeland said, don't worry, Canada will be fine. Apparently, neither she nor Justin Trudeau were following what the incoming president was saying. And now we must take account and we must be honest with our unprecedented weakness. After 9 years of Prime Minister Trudeau, our GDP is smaller than it was when he took off, per capita is smaller than it was when he took office. In fact, our per capita GDP has dropped more than any other G7 country since the year before COVID. We have the most indebted households. We've had the worst housing inflation. A quarter of our people are in poverty. 2 million people line up in food banks. Food prices have risen 37% faster in Canada than in the United States of America. Our economy is teetering on the brink of collapse. And now we face this renewed threat. We need a plan to put Canada first on the economy and on security. Justin Trudeau must put partisanship aside, not just for the sake of Team Canada, but for the sake of our people, and fully reverse his liberalization of drugs. Ban them, prosecute those who traffic in them, secure our borders against the illegal importation of fentanyl ingredients, put people in treatment and recovery to bring our loved ones home drug-free. That is necessary now more than ever. Look, President Trump has the right to put his workers and his nation's security first. I will put Canada's workers and Canada's security first. We need a Prime Minister with the strength and the smarts, the brains and the backbone to stand up for this country, to rebuild our security, our military, and our economy. That is what I will do.
Somebody said, call me when he's going to close the borders. Right? Call me when he's going to declare a moratorium on immigration and get things under control there, because Maxime Bernier is calling for that. Brett says, President Trump announced that Canada faces a 25% tariff on goods crossing the border if Canada doesn't stop the flow of illegal immigrants and fentanyl into the United States. Poilievre calls this an unjust threat. Do you think Trump is justified in seeking these measures? Yes, 100% yes, I think that Trump is justified in seeking these measures. And like I think that it's a good strategy using diplomacy to get a problem solved that would otherwise be a very, very difficult problem to solve. Here is Based Maidens, and they say, putting Canada first. Here's Pierre Poilievre, putting Canada first. Right, so there's lots of examples of this. There's a whole bunch of examples of Poilievre wearing, pandering to different groups. I mean, you could go through Twitter and find it, or X now to find it. You can look through pictures of Poilievre, and he's wearing different outfits, just like Mr. Dress Up. I mean, Justin Trudeau. Right, so the whole thing is, it's interesting. It's interesting that they're all using the same rhetoric, right? Cernovich, and he's a U.S. politician guy who's watching on all this too, right? He says this is the look of a man who knows Canada may have to be liberated, and he's hoping to find diplomatic solutions. I hope he succeeds. Otherwise, Canada will need to be annexed. The shitlibs can all be put in their own independent province. The rest of Canada will be free. No, we should not hand over. The mistake we make is saying, let's give them, Vancouver. Let's give them an area, because then they use that as a power base and expand. Like, no, we should fight, and we should assert ourselves and say this is insanity, and we refuse to live in insanity. We shouldn't hand it over and say you live in insanity and we'll be over here building our families and things like that, because our families get corrupted, our societies, and I mean, like, they use WAP, they use all sorts of different ways to influence and come into those enclaves and destroy them. And they don't stay in their area, right? They come into your area because they can't create. They can only pervert, right? Anyway, I digress. Pierre Poilievre, again, puts a letter. He says, we need a Canada First plan to for our economy and security. I've asked the Speaker of the House for an emergency debate on the threat of U.S. tariffs on Canada. Bring it home. I think this is worth reading, and it's very quick. So it says, Dear Speaker, last night President Donald Trump announced that he will impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods exported to the United States on January 20th, 2025, his first day in office. The impact of these forthcoming tariffs will crush Canadian workers, their paychecks, and the economy, as two-way trade war, as a two-way trade between Canada and the United States accounts for 40% of our economy. Canada needs a plan, and the Prime Minister does not have one. Conservatives are calling for an emergency debate in order for Parliament to address the proposed 25% U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, the impact it will have on workers and the economy, and to question the Liberal government on their failings to establish a plan and path forward on this matter. As the proposed 25% tariffs impact all regions of the country and all sectors of the economy, this issue satisfies all requirements for an emergency debate. Thank you. Sincerely, Pierre Poilievre, Leader of the Opposition. So it's interesting. We'll see. I don't know if it's going to actually go through. I'm sure there's some back and forth that needs to be firmed up with whips and things like that. So we'll see if we see a debate based on that in the House soon. Like if we get an emergency debate, be interesting, right? And if we get an emergency debate, it doesn't seem to matter. Jagmeet Singh he's got his eye on his pension, baby. Like he's not seeing anything else, right? That pension is the most important thing. Canada's economy, he wants to see that pension. And it's after Trump's inaugurated that Jagmeet gets his pension, as far as I understand it, right? So goodness gracious, I hope we're able to address these issues before January 20th. Fingers crossed. Dr. Virginia J. Johnson is highlighting this, or Canadian political memes put this out. Hey, Pierre, do you want to steal this slogan too? So the Canada First slogan is PPC, and no globalist agenda is PPC as well. So we'll see. He's already kind of done that and broken it. He's like, oh, we won't have anybody WEF in the Conservative caucus. Hey, Michelle Revel, what's up? How's it going, Mr. Baird? Yeah, nice to see you as well. Right? Like, Tony Clement, hey, right? Trilateral Commission, we love it, right? Like, so, but the Conservative Party is concerning on all the people they're putting in there, almost as concerning as Donald Trump. But you know, it's all the same. It's all the same, and I'll show you proof that it's all the same. Here's Justin Trudeau first talking about Canada first for real. So that's kind of funny, right? Everybody and their dog say Canada first. Here's Justin Trudeau.
Prime Minister.
Instead of panicking and falling back on slogans like the Leader of the Opposition, we rolled up our sleeves and we're getting to work. We're working with all the premiers, pulling together in a Team Canada approach, because that's how we defend Canadian jobs from coast to coast to coast. I spoke with Donald Trump yesterday evening, talked about how important it was for us to work together to solve some of the challenges we're facing as a continent, as countries, but also work to grow our economy, protect our workers on both sides of the border. This is the responsible, methodical approach we're taking as we move forward, while our opponent falls back on slogans and fear.
Prime Minister.
This Canada First approach, coast to coast to coast. Did you not hear any slogans in Justin Trudeau's speech there? Like, it was slogan after slogan after slogan. And he's like, oh yeah, we don't want to talk about sloganeering conservatives, right? I just think it's funny. I think it's funny because it's all slogans all the time with these guys, right? Now it's time to get to work. Gov.exe is highlighting this. He says, Justin Trudeau says he spoke to Donald Trump yesterday and made it clear his government will always put Canada first. So everybody's using Canada first. Now it's time to roll up his sleeves, be responsible, and get to work defending Canadians. So after 9 years, Trudeau now decides to get to work? Yuck. Here's Doug Ford, and 4.5 minutes. We're not going to listen to that. Rebel News is highlighting this one. Quote, like a family member stabbing you right in the heart. Or like, you know, getting made for your mom. Premier Ford says President-elect Trump proposing tariffs and comparing Canada's border security to Mexico is the most insulting thing he's heard. We hear the message loud and clear, Ford says. I'm saying like convenience made, like you're getting real annoying mom made, not like you're struggling and have a terminal disease and will die soon and this is for your comfort. There's a distinction. Although it's a slippery slope, very difficult to come to a conclusion. And I mean, palliative care, hospices, things like that, like dying with dignity, all that kind of stuff, like that's important too. Anyway, I don't want to get derailed. I'm trying to make a point. Brian Lilly says, we have options with Donald Trump and his tariffs. Complain about Trump's tariffs, threat, or act to avoid them. Let's hope the Trudeau government makes the right choice. I don't think anybody really trusts the Trudeau government to make the right choice. Maxime Bernier says, well, hold on. I need to do these ones. Okay. I'm almost there. Maxime Bernier says, has the National Post just become another shitty propaganda mag that not only completely ignores me and the PPC, but tries to pretend I never even existed? This is not an oversight. It's intentional. The level of dishonesty in this article by Chris Selly is just mind-boggling. So on the left is an older article from 2016 about Maxime Bernier saying, I'm coming out against supply management and I want all Conservatives to join me. And National Post says, no one in politics has ever tried to sell Canadians on cheaper, better, and more variety in milk, butter, cheese, poultry, and eggs. And so, I mean, that's not true, right? It's not true. So dishonest, up and down. Chris says, my opinion that the Conservative Party of Canada is globalist is based on their policies and their silence on issues. If that makes you angry, take it up with Pierre Poilievre. I despise Trudeau, but I want to see all globalists removed from power in Canada. Canada first. So Chris is saying that. And Greg is calling out Joe. Joe says, the logo we can all get behind. Canada first. It feels like the next stage of the PSYOP. Feels like the nationalist stage of the PSYOP. Greg says, Joe here supports Pierre Poilievre, who completely ignored the plight of Canadians fighting for basic rights at the Freedom Convoy in 2022. Poilievre co-signed the Emergency Act being called on truckers. Poilievre supports mass immigration and multiple foreign wars, Ukraine, Israel. None of that is Canada first. Yep. Great points, Greg. Great points. So why? Why is this all true? Here is Wide Awake Media. I read a book, and I can't remember the book, The Committee of 300. That's the book. I read the book. I read that book. Committee of 300 outlines this guy and what this guy highlighted and found out in his whole thing. So here's a medium length thread, and I guess we're going to have a long show today. It's a medium length thread talking about why there's two birds or two wings of the same bird, why the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party are doing exactly the same thing. They're walking to the same, they're marching to the same beat. They're saying the same rhetoric exactly. Okay, it's the same party. It's the same picture. There's no difference, right? Corporate wants you to see the difference between this. There's no difference. It's all virtually the same. Here's why. Okay, this is, I promise you're going to save this tab. Okay, Wide Awake Media says, for more than a century, a secretive global network of financial elites have been working behind the scenes to establish a world system of financial control, controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world. In the early 1960s, historian Carol Quigley was permitted to study this network's secret records and decided to lay bare their plans for the world. What he discovered was shocking. Carol Quigley was a conspiracy theorist, or wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was a respected historian at Georgetown, Harvard, and Princeton. One of his most notable students was Bill Clinton, who publicly praised Quigley during his 92 presidential nomination acceptance speech. So, do you want to hear it? Let's hear it. Just because Bill Clinton's so reputable, got a cigar?
As a teenager, I heard John Kennedy's summons to citizenship. And then as a student at Georgetown, I heard that call clarified by a professor named Carol Quigley, who said to us that America was the greatest nation in history because our people had always believed in two things: that tomorrow can be better than today, and that every one of us has a personal moral responsibility to make it so. As a teenager.
So there you go. Interesting. I thought Almighty God was going to come into that, but it didn't. Moving on. So what did Quigley teach that left such an impression? In his 1966 book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, Quigley revealed, quote, there does exist and has existed for a generation an international Anglophile network which operates, to some extent, in the way the radical right believes the Communist Act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the Round Table groups, has no aversion to cooperating with communists or any other group, and frequently has done so. However, Quigley was opposed to this network. In fact, he admired much of their work, as explained by Quigley. Quote, I know of the operations of this network because I've studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 in the early 60s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have, for much of my life, been close to it and to many of its instruments. His only objection, my chief difference of opinion, is that it wishes to remain unknown, and I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. Quigley further elaborated on the history of this secretive global network. The American branch of this organization, sometimes called the Eastern Establishment, has played a very significant role in the history of the United States in the last generation. That's just in the last 30, 40 years, right? Last generation. Money for the wildly for the widely ramified activities of this organization came originally from the associations and followers of English industrial Cecil Rhodes. Since 1925, there have been substantial contributions from the wealthy individuals and from foundations and firms associated with the international banking fraternity, including Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan Chase, and the Rockefeller family. Oh, not Chase, just J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller family, excuse me. And at the end of the war in 1914, it became clear that at the end of the War of 1914, so at the end of the war, 1918, or whenever it stopped, 1918, right? It became clear that the organization of this system had to be greatly extended by creating front organizations in different countries. This is the beginnings of what would become the United Nations, the WHO, and the rest of the supranational entities that we know now, right? And 1914, they were trying to destroy Germany, and they sort of did, but then they triggered the events of the Second World War. The English front organizations, called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, had its nucleus in each area. The existing submerged roundtable group in New York, it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations. So what does the secretive network's ultimate goal, according to Quigley, quote, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system, Quigley explained, was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreement arrived at in infrequent private meetings and conferences. So all of those meetings that they go to on our tax dollar, these people are actually meeting up and figuring things out at a high level. The rest of it's just window dressing. It doesn't actually matter. It's bullshit, right? The real meeting's happening behind the scenes. The apex of the system was to be the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations, excuse me. Sound familiar in light of modern day conversations surrounding global governance? Remember, Quigley wrote all of this in 1966. Not to worry, we can just vote our way out of this, right? Wrong. As Quigley explained, quote, the argument that the two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other on the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrine and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy. It should be possible to replace the party in office every 4 years if necessary by the other party, which will still pursue with new vigor approximately the same basic policies, which we saw in action in the United Kingdom recently. They kicked out the rascals of Sunak and his Conservative Party out, right? See you later. And they brought in Labour, and Labour is worse than their Conservatives. So, yay. When Jagmeet Singh comes in and lowers the jackboot, we shouldn't be surprised. Wide Awake Media says Quigley's revelations in Tragedy and Hope came at a cost. After its publication, the book mysteriously went out of print. Some believe it was suppressed because it exposed information powerful individuals preferred to stay hidden. Quigley himself claimed that the publisher stopped printing it without explanation. Fortunately, Quigley's works, Tragedy and Hope, and the Anglo-American Establishment can still be acquired in both hard copy and ebook versions and remain essential reading for anyone who's curious about how global power truly operates behind the scenes. To learn more about Carroll Quigley's paradigm-shattering revelations, I'd highly recommend reading both books. If you enjoyed this thread, please share, comment, like, and follow, and subscribe. And so, yeah, so I think that, and I've read the Committee of 300, I think is what it's called, references these books, kind of gives these books like a too long didn't read, but at the same time there's probably nuggets in there that are missed in the summary, right, that I'm referencing. I digress. It's interesting what's happening, and I think that it's two wings of the same bird. They're doing exactly the same thing as each other, and they have control of the elections to the degree that voting our way out is not going to be effective, I don't think. This section has taken a long time. Anyway, yesterday there was an election in Nova Scotia, and Tim Houston won, and he got 42 seats, so a very, very big majority. Congratulations to Tim Houston. And the Liberals got 2 seats, and that is great. Good job, everybody. Maritimes usually votes Liberal, right? And so Maritime provinces voting 2 seats Liberal, that's a good indication. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. Brett says, when a Liberal province like Nova Scotia rejects the Liberals this hard, you know it's bad news for Justin Trudeau. Maybe. We'll see. Breaking Global News says the NDP is now the official opposition in Nova Scotia as the Liberals are being dealt a devastating blow on election night. And yeah, people are just not trusting the Liberals whatsoever. Doug Ford says, congratulations to my friend Premier Tim Houston on tonight's impressive majority election win. I'm looking forward to continuing our work together, standing up for Canadian workers and fighting the Liberal carbon tax to keep costs down for families. Let's make it happen, he says. Yeah, I don't know. The Doug Ford is suspect. Here is, we've got to talk about the ongoing Arrive scam, Green Slush Fund scam, Randy Balsano, his company scam. It's all kind of the same scam. Insiders are giving government contracts to companies that they own or have controlling interest in or have conflict of interest in. And that's a huge problem because it's fraudulent, like it seems fraudulent. And so this is rocking the Canadian government currently. And it doesn't seem like we're going to get to the bottom of it. It certainly doesn't seem like we're going to have any kind of judicial satisfaction. Nobody's going to go to jail. There's not going to be a perp walk of, the people who seem to have defrauded taxpayers out of hundreds of millions of dollars. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem at all. Nobody's going to jail. I'd be shocked if they do, right? And so what does our procurement look like? If you have to buy something on the government's behalf, what's the oversight? It seems like absolutely nothing. And we're all paying the price for that now in dollars, right? Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.